I think Delegate Deeds, or Senator Deeds wanted you to.
I just wanted some explanation of the letters and whether, I mean, we've heard both sides of it, and I see the State Corporation Commission as an impartial arbiter to some extent, to a large extent. I mean, we count on you to give us accurate information.
And that is our job. And I'm here as an accountant, and I try to provide information so you can make an informed decision. And by the way, I'm Kim Pate with the State Corporation Commission. And Senator Deeds, you were asking about the accuracy, or somebody was asking about the accuracy of the excess earnings.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. If we turn to the letter, the first letter we talked about, dated January 27th, I'm just going to use as an example. The answer to number 5, the question was, how much has Dominion over-earned since the passage of the Regulation Act in 2007? And we quantified $1.6 billion. All right. So where did that number come from? That comes from the public record, actually. We had a going-in base rate case in 2009. There were earnings decided then. As a result of that base rate case, there was a rate case settlement, and about $725 million were given back to customers at that point of that base rate case. We've since had biennial reviews during that time. These numbers come from those dockets before the commission. If you want, I can provide you source documents for all of this. And in addition, when the rates were frozen with the transitional rate period, Dominion has actually filed what we refer to as off-year filings with the commission. So they have not been reviewed by the commission, but the rest of the number to get up to the $1.6 billion are Dominion's own numbers, unadjusted. No funny magic on my side type situation. So that's an example of where those come from. And I have source documents for all these. If y'all are interested, we'll be happy to provide those at a later date.
Well, Mr. Chair, down in response to number 7, in addition to the $1.6 billion, you identified another $1.8 billion?
Yes, sir. All of those are in docketed staff reports. Okay. Actually, I did all of those reports for the commission. I've been around a long time, shall we say. So I've either been involved in every one of these cases and all of these numbers, or I've directly supervised. And I have all the docketed numbers for those cases too. I don't have them on me now, but we can provide those at that time.
Mr. Chair, of that 1.6 plus 1.8, 3.4, in response to question 8, you say the total of 1.3 billion has been refunded.
That is correct.
Okay.
And also there were, Mr. Murray was talking about, well, it doesn't take into account additional expenditures for scrubbers. It doesn't take into account the not recovery of fuel. Actually, all of those numbers are included. All of those numbers, it's net of all of this.
So you're saying he's wrong?
Yes, sir.
And could I ask one more question, Mr. Chair? You've been at the State Corporation Commission for a long time. How many times over the last couple of decades has the regulatory structure changed?
Since about 1998, it's changed quite a bit.
And Mr. Chair, every change has been because of some legislation that's passed here. Is that correct?
The commission follows whatever the law says.
Okay.
So if the legislator changes and the law changes, we follow that.
And my point in asking that question, Mr. Chair, is because if we want to understand, if we want stability from a regulatory scheme, we come in here every couple of years since 1996 or so. We've changed the scheme.
Okay.
Okay. And there were just a couple more questions that I wanted to address. There was a question concerning the return on equity or the profit margin. What was the fair profit margin? I'm sorry, I can't remember who asked that question. But the answer is the commission just determined recently it's 9.2% return on equity as the fair market value. Now, based on the legislation, we've talked about it a lot, there's a floor. And so the actual floor is slightly higher than the fair market value determined by the commission. So actually, Dominion's authorized return because of that is more than the 9.3, a little bit more than 9.3% range. Now, as far as, I talked about the scrubbers and the fuel. As far as there were a lot of talk about the rate adjustment clauses, the rate adjustment clauses will continue on based on the FEBA bill. Nothing changes with that. Just wanted to make that clear. They don't go away until 2024. They're still here. We have rate adjustment clauses in front of us now, and they will continue on. And again, I think I said it a few minutes ago, but as far as the scrubbers and the fuel and not recovering it, all of those numbers are net of that. If they had had the fuel recovery mechanism or they had had riders for the scrubbers, the excess earnings would have actually been higher.
All right. Senator Edwards.
Yeah, I have a question, SCC. This bill is kind of strangely written with regard to these notwithstanding this and notwithstanding that. Can the SCC figure this out? by reading it?
Yes, sir.
That's not going to be a
We do
problem.
understand, we do understand the bill. What we would do is we would do a normal Chapter 10 rate case, other than there would be potential refunds. That could happen. The commission's dealt with refunds in the past. Like I said, in the last base rate case back in 2009, refunds were a component of that case too. So we do understand that, and we understand that how it works, yes.
And Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, the rate of return, 9.2%, that's the base rate, and that does not include the riders, the extras.
The 9.2% is for all of Dominion's recovery. When the law says that once the commission sets a return on equity, whatever the return is, that's to be applied to the base rate cases, or the triennial or biennial reviews, and also for the rate adjustment clauses. So that's a continuing across. And when we talk about the rate adjustment clauses, those are dollar-for-dollar mechanisms. They're dollar-for-dollar mechanisms. The company actually recovers its cost and is guaranteed to recover its profit margin on that. Only in a base rate case is the profit at risk.
Mr. Chairman, follow up on that. So what you're saying is the base rate is one thing, the adjustments is actually a cost plus.
Well, they're both cost plus a profit margin. It's just at base rates, you have the opportunity to recover your costs in the profit margin, where in a rate adjustment clause, when we talk about the offshore wind, we talk about the solar, we talk about all these different items, that's guaranteed recovery from customers. But at the end of the day, customers pay for everything anyway. It's just a matter of what mechanism.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Senator Marston.
Thank you. Did we get a total bill of the amount of money of things that you did not recover on, expenses that were not recoverable? Did we get a total on that?
Senator Marsden, as I said, those numbers actually included the scrubbers, any depreciation, any recovery of the cost is included in our excess earnings. The numbers will be higher if they had recovered them through a rate adjustment clause. Those are included. They suppress the earnings. Earnings are lower as a result of that recovery. It's included in our numbers. You just can't see it, but it's in the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman? I'm be short.
Bill, she just questioned what you had said before, that they were not, that they were included in, it was a net, including that. Is that, let's say you.
Mr. Chairman, we'll turn to the letter. Number 7, it should be noted the Dominion Energy Virginia reported a different level of over-earnings during the period. None of these cases were litigated. None of these reports were litigated. I can simply say, and I led with a caveat, I was not working at Dominion at the time. I was in graduate school when this period began. Having said that, my understanding from I've been told the correct figure is $1.8 billion in fuel costs company absorbed during the frozen fuel factor. Riders were not created until 2007. There was a rider for APCO in the 2004 legislation Senator Norman carried. Riders are an artifact of a 2007 legislation. They're not part of traditional review. What I will say, and what I have been working at Dominion, is in terms of the over-earnings or the alleged over-earnings during the period we're discussing, the Commission's letter is not accounting for the 70-30 earnings split from what I can tell. And again, I'll be happy to look at the backup data. The earning effect of the earnings collar and amortizing an expense does not make it free. It makes it more expensive.
All right, the bill's before
Mr.
us.
Chairman,
We need
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Smith.
one thing. I'm not here for the mayor or anybody else, but the mayor of Norfolk, Kenneth Alexander, came up here today. He also asked to come to our caucus, and he asked members, no party has asked members that please do not vote for this bill. Now, I represent Norfolk along with Senator Lewis. So I'm saying, so I represent Norfolk and Chesapeake. To me, I don't care what they say out there. My city, and one of my mayors of my city who came up here today and pleaded to us and asked us not to vote for this bill, and that's what I'm going to do.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, there's a motion and a second to report.
Substitute motion, Mr. Chairman.
Substitute motion.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to my friends that I have great respect for, I'm going to move to pass it by indefinitely and speaking to that motion.
Is there a second? There's a second.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, as I've listened to both sides present testimony, I've heard about the notwithstandings, and I despise notwithstanding language because we're never entirely certain what it means. It appears to me, based upon what Delegate Jones said, that there's not going to be any accurate forecast of what rates would be. As a matter of fact, you said they may go up and they may go down, and I respect that, so I don't say that confrontationally. It's contrary. I've been in the midst of this for many years. It is contrary to what we decided in 2018. Yes, I respect that the marketplace has changed. We went through deregulation. We went through re-regulation. We have been through it all. And it very clearly commingles Chapter 10 with some other provisions in the code. But here's what we haven't talked about. And I'll just be very direct about it. As I have sat back and observed during this session, the environmental groups and lower income groups have done their absolute unequivocal best to bend Dominion over in every way imaginable. And that's nothing new. I am old enough to remember a guy by the name of Henry Howells who said, let's keep the big boys honest. And I think about this. We have legislation that is passed in some instances that are going to cap the percentage of electrical rates that lower income people will have. Nobody's capping my rates, but we passed that legislation. We passed just tampering legislation, which I promise you is going to cost money, but because of the process that's gone on, there's a determination to eliminate every instance of fossil fuels and carbon footprints. I used to lay in bed and look out my master bedroom window and see the glow of Surrey Nuclear every night. And then there came a time where I didn't only see the glow, but I saw trellises coming up in the James River to bring nuclear energy across the James River into the service area that was being challenged because they were closing down a coal-fired fuel plant. And now the environmentalists want to come in and try to put Dominion in a situation saying that the permit should have never been granted and to revoke those permits. And I cannot tell you what the billions of dollars are going to cost, but that's another uncertainty. And I could go on and on and on. But what we don't know is I think in the General Assembly, many times, all of us, we tend to look at things in a silo. Legislation comes in front of us in a particular committee, and we focus on that, but we might not be sitting on a corollary committee that's looking at things. I have not seen one person, I have not seen one paper, white paper, that has put together all these bills that are working their way through pertaining to energy this session, and to tell me what the aggregated cumulative impact is going to be on the industry or on the raters. We don't know. We don't know. And so the basis of my motion, Mr. Chairman, is not so much being adverse to these very fine gentlemen, is that I think we need to take a deep breath. I think we need to wait and address this next year and see. So we
can't do it next year, Senator.
Jay, don't shake your head. I have entitled my opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. And I'm very respectful of your opinion. You were well educated, so I got great confidence in you.
No, he was my professor. He's making a joke.
Thank you, Jay. That was not a dig at him. He and I know one another. And I just think that we are moving in a too expansive, too quick pace when we don't know what the impact of all this is going to be. And I'm very respectful of what you all are trying to do, very respectful.
All right, it's before us, the substitute motion is to pass by definitely. All those in favor of the motion vote aye, those opposed no.
Ayes 8, no 7.
Bill is passed by indefinitely. Thank you. All right, let's see.